Hey guys, so just wanted to give a little context to this upcoming episode, which is unfortunately spread a bit before we've had the chance to release and has got a few people talking. Just wanted to state up front that these are just experiences that my guest and I have personally gone through. Everyone's experiences are different, and despite everything, I loved my time in school and hold those memories and friendships very dear. I should also state that by all accounts, our school is a very different place today for the better. Hope you enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of Why Do I with me, Uday Jhala. My attempt in this podcast is to try to peel back the layers of some of my favorite human people until they are laid bare, whether they like it or not. My next guest and I go back more than 25 years, and right from that fateful day that we joined the all-boys boarding school at the age of 11. He's a one-time amateur stand-up comic, one of those annoying Wikipedia editors who correct everything you say. We even worked together on a risque cartoon comedy series, and now he's an investment banker turned Hollywood startup entrepreneur. Throughout this last quarter of a century, our lives have been inextricably intertwined, and he is someone who has always looked out for me, and I have been a fascinated observer of his own personal journey and self-discovery, something I am excited to discuss with him and something that I'm sure our listeners will really be able to relate to. Welcome Abi Som to the podcast. And I think the best place for us to start is to rewind back to those formative years in boarding school, a formidable and daunting place to grow up during those early, dark and cold, lonely nights in the foothills of the Himalayas. Why don't you set the mood for us, Abi?
Right. No, I'm happy to do that. And thank you for that kind introduction, Uday. To add to my past before meeting Uday in the foothills of the Himalayas, as beautiful as that sounds, it was quite an experience. I was born in the States, but my father was a diplomat. So every 3 years we moved to different countries. So I grew up in a bunch of different countries, and it was kind of weird because you spend 3 years and then you move to another country, spend 3 years. So it's a very interrupted upbringing. And then after I did my junior high schooling in Canada, my parents decided to throw me into a very strict disciplinarian, almost army-style boarding school in the Himalayas where I met Uday. So from being a spoiled brat, wanting Nike Airs and watching Michael Jordan and listening to Pearl Jam and trying to be cool in Ottawa, Canada, of all places, I was sent to a boarding school where we had to wake up at 5 a.m, where there was corporal punishment, which means we were physically beaten, where we lived in a little dorm where it was intense. And it's a very famous boarding school, but what I will describe over the course of this podcast will highlight the things we went through. And then, of course, that is not the main focus. I also wanted to talk about my journey in learning more about myself and looking to get towards a higher state of happiness, as hippie and silly as that sounds.
I'm excited to get stuck in, but just to make a comment on your knowledge of Pearl Jam coming into school, where you convinced us that the lines to the song were Jeremy smoking, yeah, and you made it seem that Pearl Jam was talking about how cool Jeremy was by smoking. And it didn't take us till many years later to figure it was Jeremy spoke in class.
Spoke in class today. Yeah.
So
that was embarrassing.
But I remember you, man, joining school, and you'd have all this fancy food from home, and we'd all be like, oh my God, all this Canadian junk food. And we'd be so excited because just to set the setting, how we had it in Dune, everybody had to wear the same uniform. You weren't allowed home clothes. You weren't really allowed a lot of home stuff. You weren't allowed to wear a watch till very late in school, so that everybody was supposed to be on the same standing, as it was, and coming from the same background. So there was no sense of somebody being a snob or someone treating somebody else any differently from how they grew up or what possessions they may have had. Growing up in an all-boys boarding school is a special thing. For those of you who haven't experienced it, I tell you, it's unique in the sense that the kind of friendships you make with the guys that you grew up with those are forever, and those kind of bonds that you have sort of never go. But on the flip side, some of the insecurities that an all boys boarding school leaves you with, whether that's knowing how to talk to girls, whether that's just, in my case at least, I was bullied to such an extent where it was always about you're a loser, you're useless, you can't do anything in life. And I carried a lot of that insecurity with me. And it took me a long time to sort of have the confidence to come out of my shell. Did you experience it the same way that I did? Was that the kind of things that you sort of faced? And how did that affect you later?
I think school was fundamental in how it shapes, I think, everyone who graduates from there. And I don't think it's necessarily in a very positive way. I mean, yes, the positive parts of camaraderie and this and that and friendship forever, blah, 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 all that's good. But I think it creates in you a sense of fear, anxiety, achievement anxiety, which, yes, can drive you towards becoming a CEO or building a big company or making a lot of money or whatever. But ultimately, I think people end up being anxious. I see a lot of people who drink too much, we've all been there. There's something not kind of super stable about how people are after graduating. And a part of it has to do with not getting the luxuries you want, basic things really, while you're in school. And so when you graduate, you tend to dive into things that you were deprived of for a long time. But I think for purposes of this discussion, I wanted to explain how really violent it was. And I don't think that has ever been covered in a podcast or has ever been spoken about, because there's a sort of omerta about, we don't talk about what went down in school. And I say, fuck that shit. We talk about everything now. And to give the listeners a context on what school we're talking about one of the most elite boarding schools in the world. Certainly the most elite boarding school in India. Prime ministers of India have studied there. In industrial tycoons, billionaires in our own batch, one above, one below, probably 6 billionaires who run some of the biggest companies in the world. So that's one side of the context of how elite it is. And you don't have to be wealthy to get in. You can be from a service middle-class background like I am. Like I was. I'm from a completely middle-class background, from a service family. My father worked in the government of India, which is not, it didn't make him rich. And then you also have, so they've taken people from various stratas of society. And one of the good things about Doon is it's a great equalizer. So there's no money in school. Everyone's equal. There's uniform. When you go to sleep, you're in a uniform. When you wake up, you're in a uniform. And so the one good thing was it was never about money. No one spoke about, I am rich, I am this, I have that house. No one gave a shit about that. What it did become about, in fact, one of the funny things is I didn't even know who some of my closest friends were, like in the sense of what they did. Like one guy owns like a biggest XYZ company in the world. One guy owns, it's like shocking to realize these things once you graduate. We had an idea. Now, once you take into the fact that there's a great equalizer in terms of financial assets, etc., where it becomes hyper competitive and difficult is that there's this culture of achievement from a very young age, and there's a system of physical violence and corporal punishment. And the corporal punishment in Doon was not necessarily from the teachers, but were rather from students themselves. And it's 2020 now. We were there in the early 90s, and I'm sure to some an American audience, it'll sound shocking. Maybe to some British people in India, it'll be a little more familiar. On my first day of school, a senior came in, broke open my suitcase and took the food that my parents had sent for me for the next 3 months. And it was just like, oh my God, this is my food. This is what I'm going to survive on. And it's gone. As we called it, home food. And then, if you didn't perform while playing hockey or soccer or basketball, you were physically beaten. I remember in hockey, if you didn't perform, the seniors used to take hockey sticks and hit you with hockey balls, which are really hard, or with the sticks themselves. So if we didn't make our bed properly, we were beaten, punched or slapped. Boom, right there, right then. Uday, who was interviewing me, I mean, he went through shit because he was really, really bad at making his bed. And as trivial as that sounded,
I was bad at a lot of things in school. I was singled out for being bad at a lot of things, but yeah.
And I don't think he bathes very many times. And then eventually, even I didn't bathe much in school either. But when the seniors came and found that, they would.
And you've taken this habit into your adult life, right?
I haven't bathed for years, and I smell wonderful. And so I remember one particular senior who, imagine we're kids, we were 12, 13, 11, I don't know how old we were, picked up Uday and hung him from the second floor of a balcony. And if he had let him go, he could have died or broken all his bones. And just hanging a guy from a building and just watching that happen. And he could have easily fallen. And then, of course, he was thoroughly beaten after that.
Yeah, bringing back a flood of wonderful memories, Abi, for me personally. Some of these stories which I was hoping to forget. And we can go into some more of those stories because that is one of many things that happened to me and my peers and any of the kids that we've known.
And me.
Everything from my face being smashed on a urinal to being forced to drink someone's piss to
I remember that. We both drank that piss.
Yeah, to be somebody serving tennis balls at us while we were not allowed to cover our faces or genitals. And I remember somebody's eye almost got popped out. Does it disturb you, Abi? When we look back now, when we've looked back and we laugh off those stories as boarding school stories, we all get together and like, oh, you remember that time this guy did that to me. Does that bother you that we trivialize it so much?
No, well, this podcast will probably be the first time anyone has ever spoken about any of this shit in even half a public forum. That's one. Does it bother me? I don't think it's that much about revealing these facts to the world, but rather it is more about understanding the psychological ramifications of these incidences in the mind of a young person. And as we know, our mind is molded at a younger age, and things we experience at a younger age become hidden underneath various levels of the unconscious, and then they emerge with other triggers. So like we were always on our guard against insults or against being attacked, and the way to fight back was to attack even more. And so now, like I have like this reaction, if somebody tries to cut me off on the road, I would scream at them. And I realize it's an overreaction, but it is like this, it's psychosomatic. It's coming from a very old place. And that's just how psychotherapy, how the mind works. These are old experiences, go into the subconscious, and as you become an adult, unrelated but similar experiences trigger a disproportionate reaction to what happened. There are positive effects as well, but not positive, like positive as in some people are driven for success. And and part of my story is that I was so attacked in school that I became very good academically and all that, and I'll get to that. But there are two particular incidences that I wanted to highlight, which delve into the sheer sadism and trauma of what happened. And it's funny when you read, I read a lot, and I read about the nature of what happens in the childhood and abuse and this and that. And it's like trivial shit what I read compared to what we saw. I even remember seeing the movie Shawshank Redemption while we were in school. They screened it on a Saturday, and I was like, dude, these guys had it easy. I'm not even fucking around, bro. And so let me give you a detail. There was one incident that everyone, I mean, it's not like I need proof. Everyone remembers it. No one speaks about it. Where a hockey team, or was it a soccer team?
Okay, I actually know the proper details of the story. No, it was a hockey team. So what would happen was you'd have 5 teams contributing towards a house cup. So you'd have your senior 11 called the house 11. You'd have your second 11, your third 11, and your 2 junior teams. And this was down to the second 11. I remember it was called Leagues 1. And it came down to the last game. And we needed to win that game in order for us to win the cup. We ended up drawing the game 0-0. And so what happened is we just lost the cup on some points. And so the senior captain of the team called the 3 strikers of the hockey team because they didn't score a goal in that game, which would have won us the cup.
And made them kneel.
Made them kneel down in the common area of the house. And this is a 17-year-old kid making kids who are 16 and 15, not even that much younger than him, 16 and 15, kneel down in front of the entire house. And then he called everybody in the house one by one, all 67.
Like 100 people, or 70 people, yeah.
To spit on their faces one by one. And that is everybody from the age of 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, all had to come one by one and spit on these three guys' faces. In a lot of ways, that's way more disturbing than getting beaten up with a hockey stick.
Oh, no. It was disturbing to the extent that I remember that by the time I got, and by the way, this is, if you don't spit, you get beaten up. So it's not like you have an option to spit on them or not. So by the time I got into, in quote, spit on them, there was so much saliva already dripping over their faces that I almost puked. And then I did a quick fake spit and dodged them and walked away. I mean, I'd like to believe I fake spat. But anyways, now imagine both for the spitter and the spittee, which is not a word, but we'll create it for now because of this morbid, gross discussion we're having, how profoundly scarring it is. It is a humiliation of a level which is unheard of. This senior who did this was the prefect of the house. Everyone knows his name, and he was the same guy who hung Uday from the balcony, right? And you ran into this guy a couple of years ago, or a year ago, I think, and he pretended not to remember you. Imagine how scarring that is, that he didn't remember you. Now, what we're describing is not just this guy, but it was a system which permeated that even when we became seniors, and I left a little bit earlier, but when we became seniors, many of our batchmates who went through this pain did the same thing to the juniors. Not all of them, I would say 20%. Like Uday, for example, was the nicest guy ever, never did anything to anyone. But there were others who we know really well who did the same thing to their juniors. And one other quick thing that I'd like to mention in terms of the cruel things which happened is terrible thing called the slapping competition. Now, a slapping competition is where a senior, a prefect or a captain, makes two juniors who are friends face each other, and you're ordered to hit the other person, and the other person, and then the other guy is ordered to hit you back. And if you don't hit them back, you get hit. So you're forced into slapping them. So you start with a little slap and then a little slap, and then the slaps get harder. And if you ever get hit by someone, it raises your temper. And then eventually, by force, you're in a fist fight, punching someone on the face from nothing. And the seniors are sitting and laughing and enjoying it. So it's one of those prison fights. On the positive side, it makes everyone into achievers, because if you don't achieve, you're condemned. Now, that I say positive, it's positive in the cosmetic way, the superficial way the world looks at achievement, that you have to be good at something, you have to earn money, you have to become a CEO, you have to become a president, which now in my older life, I realize is all bullshit, but it made people achieve. But I think what it did for me, and maybe it did it for you, I know that you became one of the best achievers in school. You became one of the most artistic people. You got the highest awards in school. You became a playwright, an actor. You were on the football team. And this was all this anxiety of perform. For me, I became academically very strong. I got into the basketball team barely. And then when I went to college, I had a perfect 4.0 GPA. And I got into one of the top banks in Wall Street. But all of it was done on this string of trying to impress somebody, an invisible somebody, that I am good enough and I can achieve. Though through the process, I was fairly miserable. And so I think this is sort of, and then a lot of people, react to all of this by drinking too much. I had my spells of drinking too much. One goes through their own ups and downs. But I think this is sort of a good, what's the word when you transition from one thing to another? A good that's the word I was looking for. A good segue to something far more pleasant, something far more real, on how in the last few years, and particularly in the past 8 months, I have tried to deconstruct what has always caused me anxiety, which I am almost 99% sure was born in this trauma that we faced in this boarding school, and how I'm beginning to become a much happier individual.
I wanted to talk to you because I've seen this incredible growth of something that's changed in you in the last maybe 6 months to a year, where you've sort of, I think, distanced yourself from that pressure that you had put on yourself because you're trying to please that invisible person. And that's where I want you to sort of, I want to understand what took you down that path. What made you realize that something needs to change?
I think a perennial sense of anxiety towards achievement. Like I was saying, if I got a B in in college, I would be miserable. I never got a B. I got A's. Then I got into Wall Street in one of the best banks, investment banks. And then I realized I was just mid-level out there, not the top, not the bottom. And then I was like, oh my God, I need to be better. Why am I not good enough? So I'm like trying to please somebody. And then after, so there's always been, I've done okay, but then there's always been, why have I not done better? And then that entire concept of not having done better created an insecurity in you, where you try and compensate for your perceived lack of having done better by adding other elements to your discourse, which essentially scream that I'm scared of something, or I'm afraid of something, or I'm trying to overcompensate something which is lacking.
What do you mean other elements?
So there's always something more that you could do. There was always somebody who did better than you, and why was I not that person? Involved in my work environment in Wall Street, there were people smarter than me who got the better job than me or got the better assignment than me. That made me concerned and anxious. Why was I not? And then another way of looking at it is, I should be happy that I have a job in such a place, but I was still miserable. So what I'm trying to say is, whether you're a typist in a or whether you're vacuuming your house, or whether you're, I don't know, a server at McDonald's, you can still have that relative anxiety that someone else is better than you. And then that goes back to Doon School, where we were always told to be better as you're a loser. And so that stays in your psyche in whatever it is that you do in your life, and essentially makes you anxious, because achievement has no end, right? And so why did I do what I did? In essence, like you said, I had extreme reactions, and I was a bit all or nothing. And so I looked inwards and I embraced what is an Indian principle from 2,500 years ago, which is meditation. And that has been the most profound revelation. And I just want to caveat that it's not like I'm fucking enlightened. I'm not levitating. I haven't achieved nirvana. As a book I recently read, I'm 10% happier. But that 10% is so profound that it really, and all this realization that I'm telling you about why I was came through the meditation. Till then, I was living a reactive life, reactions to a series of events.
I don't think you realize the kind of memories this would bring up, and what's that done for your sort of mindset. And is that a good thing? Is that something that we want to confront? Is it something is better that we lay buried deep beneath the surface and wait for it to explode sometime in the future? I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer in these things. I think it's just great. The fact that we're talking about it feels so therapeutic on its own.
Yeah, well, and thank you for that. Initially, it felt actually quite intense as I was messaging you on WhatsApp between the breaks in our recording. It was feeling very intense. The Freudian school of thought, wants you to uncover the root causes, etc. Sometimes the root causes of one's issues or problems are so hidden in the past that sometimes they don't even matter. It's more about addressing what the symptoms are. There are many ways of dealing with it, and this is where there's a good transition towards the second part of this conversation, which is so positive and so liberating that it actually makes me happy to wake up in the morning and look forward to getting better at what I'm trying to do. By background, I'm not a spiritual guy at all, and neither am I now. This is all scientific shit that millions of people do and has been done for 2,500 years. And there's a multi-billion-dollar industry that the West is now waking up to. And so instead of evangelizing on the benefits of meditation, I wanted to use this to transition my past experiences into my newfound clarity, and also give you practical understanding of how this works. Because people are like, oh, I'd love to meditate, but I don't have time. Oh, I'd like to meditate, but I don't get it. Oh, I'd love to meditate, but it's really hard. All of these things have answers. And so let me start with the fact that if any of you try and close your eyes for 5 minutes, you realize how hard it is to keep your attention on one object, whether it's your breath or a sensation in your body, your nose, your toes. What that's telling you is, if your mind is straying to other things, you're not really in control of your mind. And therefore, you're not really in control of your life. And therefore, we are living in a series of reactive moments, with a majority of reactive, unconscious moments, with little little sprinkles of controlled moments. So let me specify what I mean by that. As we are speaking, my two fingers on my left hand are doing something. My toes just moved. You have your hands on your chin. You didn't think of any of those things. It's just, nor did I, right? So what the practice of meditation does is it actually brings your focus back to one object so that you can observe everything else which is happening. And in observing everything else which is happening, everything becomes much clearer. And the basic thesis of it is that happiness is a skill. Now imagine how powerful that comment is. If happiness is a skill, why isn't meditation the only thing we're doing all the time if meditation leads to happiness? Because I would assume that the purpose of life is to be happy, hopefully not at other people's expense.
So is that by the logic that a skill can be learned by anybody?
Yes.
Anybody can can develop a skill. So you're saying that outside of any extenuating factors, you are able to control your happiness at some level.
Yeah, you can learn how to be happy. And this is not my opinion. This is Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Stanford, extensive medical research, brain scanning.
What is preventing the world and so many people and everybody from being happy right now?
It's beginning now. 2,500 years ago, a dude called Siddhartha Gautama Buddha figured this shit out, and then it was forgotten. And then now the West, you see, contemporary psychotherapy in the West has come to terms with the logic of the East. And that's why meditation is being taught at Google, at Salesforce, at all these companies, because it actually fucking works. It works. And what does work mean? It makes you happier, more equanimous. There are many words you can use, right? But let's stick to a basic word, happiness, right? I believe that is the ultimate goal, is it not? I mean, is making more money a goal? Is becoming really good at athletics? Is becoming the best soccer player? Those are not real goals. I think we do everything because we think it makes us happier than not doing it. And so therefore, if happiness is a state of mind, then why go anywhere else except the mind? Do you see my logic counter it if you don't?
I'm trying to understand it. It's such a concept that I guess is so alien to the way we know and understand of everything that's been taught to us as a society, that I need to have certain comforts. I need to work towards something. I need to be married and have children. I need to have a well-paying job.
Who said that? Who said that?
I would say it's something that's sort of instilled in you. Everybody tells you that from
societal.
A young age. It's like you said, from school. It's your grades. You need to have high grades. Why do you need to have high grades? You need to go to a good college. Why do you need to get to a good college? You need to have a good job. Why do you need a good job? So you can take care of your family. These are the steps to what people think is happiness, right? So for me, for somebody to come in and say, and I'm totally with you, I get you, but for me to wrap my head around this concept where you are saying none of these things matter, it's only what's inside your mind. And I'm just thinking, okay, conceptually that sounds fine, but if I have nothing, if I'm sitting in a shanty on the side of the road, can my mind space still overcome that? All the problems I have of not having any material benefit.
Okay, so let me answer that question. Very well and eloquently put and posited, which I believe that most people would think. One, the theory is that you need a certain level of basic sustenance in the pyramid of Maslow's pyramid of hierarchy of needs. And so if you are indeed in war-torn South Sudan with your half your hand blown off looking for food, you're in a state of perpetual anxiety and fight or flight, which is not conducive to happiness. So in a sense, I'm describing, I wouldn't call it a first world problem. I'm describing basic food and shelter are what you need. And the rest of it is whatever. It's a bonus. It's not a bonus. I don't know. That's part one. So you're right. The guy in the shanty. Now, there are many people who live in shanties who are quite content, and yet you see them walking around the streets of Mumbai begging. But studies have been done that they are often more content than the billionaire who's got $1 billion to lose. And this dude's got nothing to lose. So that's one part of my answer. The second part of my answer to you is the societal constructs of what makes you happy. Like you said, get good grades, get a good college, get a good job, earn money, have a family. theoretically, when society, and let's call society our parents or whoever, our peers, are telling you to do these, they believe it will make you happy. And in fact, they may make you happy to some degree for a moment, but that concept of achieving, so let's say getting a good job makes you happy. How do you think you perceive that happiness? It's through the mind, right? I mean, let's just take a step back. Everything you see and do, our entire field of consciousness and awareness is essentially a bunch of lights, neurons communicating with each other. I mean, our universe is just a reflection of chemicals in our head. So if you take things down to that very basic level, all these societal constructs of what needs to happen, doesn't need to happen, sound trivial, really.
Those are the basic tenets of even Buddhism, like you said earlier, is about letting go of attachment to anything. If you cannot have any attachment to anything and your pleasure is only derived from within,
yes,
then nothing can swing you in any direction.
Yeah, and perhaps, sorry if I was getting a little too philosophical earlier, but I do want you to understand and appreciate that our field of consciousness is just a bunch of chemical reactions going on in our head. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Now, if that is the case, and then what you posited earlier about getting a good job making you happier, by that same logic, getting that good job affects our field of consciousness in a way which supposedly makes you happy. So ultimately, it's our mind telling us that we're happy because we've gotten a good job, correct? Right? Everything is the mind, right? Our mind perceives a good job, which theoretically makes us happy. So by that logic and by that extension, fuck the job, trick your mind into thinking you're happy.
And is that what meditation is? Is that what you're saying? Meditation, tricking your mind into
tricking is a strong word, but essentially you can coach and train your mind,
programming your mind.
Scientifically proven concept called neuroplasticity, which molds the mind to focus more on inward happiness. Now, I'm not saying that we go into a fucking cave in Nepal and meditate there. I'm saying we live in the real world, you and I.
And let me caveat this by saying that you're not a scientist, so you're not like this is coming from real world experience, from your own path that you've gone through, for you to realize. And now you can't see this in the podcast, but so Abi is holding up a book called The Mind Illuminated, and this is where his educative process is. Because for me, I find this very interesting. It's one thing for me to hear something from a medical professional, right, who's telling me all of these things, which I am sort of getting is coming from some sort of education or textbook or something that I can't really relate to. But for you, have gone through a whole journey of trying to understand getting out of your own mind, essentially.
Okay, yeah. So basically, my journey has been reading around 14 books. I read quickly and I download podcasts, and so it's easy to do that. And then also practicing it. So when I quote research and studies, obviously I'm not a scientist, but I can read books which quote science, and I can take them to be credible. I've actually seen the brain scans and all that. So the science is not even in dispute. It's as real as a Tylenol will get rid of a headache. Okay, so let's just take that, put it to the side, give a big fist bump to Siddhartha Gautama, who's like the coolest Indian who ever lived, who figured everything out before like technology was invented. So like he's the guy who makes me most proud to be Indian. Anyways, taking a step away from that, going back into the real world where you and I both live. Firstly, I'm nowhere in the big journey. I'm 5% there and 10% maybe. And in that 10%, I've realized that the other 90% exists. So I've come to the realization at what I'm now at 2 hours of meditation a day, that there is theoretically a path where you can attune your mind enough that the things which made, and then now we go back into the boarding school. Now we go back into the insecurities. Now we go back into the overreactions. If you slow your mind down enough, you observe the irrationality of these triggers and you learn how to make peace with them such that you become calmer. And this, through the scientific process of neuroplasticity, is how we become, in quotes, happier. And I don't think there is a greater goal than being happy. So then why are we not just doing this? That's my question for you.
Is that something to do with training yourself to understand that we are just mere fragments of and insignificant parts of such a massive universe that all of these things that worry us every day is really not a big deal in the larger scheme of things.
Eloquently put. Yes, that's accurate. Yes, that's broadly what it does. Because everything, one of the core tenets of Buddhism is everything is impermanent. I mean, just think about our existence right now. We are born to die. From the day we come out of our mother's womb, we are a depreciating asset which will depreciate into nothingness by slowly, our eyes, our nose, our ears, our hearts, everything will decay. We are decaying beings.
That highly positive.
No, but the cognizance of that decay is the liberation. And as counterintuitive as that might sound, that cognizance is the real truth. It's not sad. I mean, the more close and the more okay you become with things getting fucked up. And by the way, a lot of what I'm saying is reading the theory and not necessarily having achieved it through my own practice.
Exactly. So how have you measured this progress in your real world? How has it affected you? I know. So on your recommendation, I started meditating myself a little while ago. I struggle. There are times I can't even get through 15 minutes, to be perfectly honest, because there's so many things that I'm thinking about, whether that's work, whether that's whatever it may be. But one of the first things that I did learn from meditating was to try not to be anxious and worry about things that are out of my control. I know that's a very simplistic form of the path to happiness.
Simplistic and profound.
But it's helped me a lot because I was anxious and worried about anything, whether that's the world we're living in right now, which a lot of us, unfortunately, are helpless with the way things are going. And it's a situation which is actually can lead to a lot of depression for a lot of people. But it's something that is kind of out of our control. And so for me to understand that if there's nothing you can do about it, what's the point?
And beautiful. Yeah, couldn't have said it any better. So let's take a real world example.
Like you're complimenting my points today. I feel like
you're making cogent,
unless that's part of your process as well.
No, it's empathy, and I'll get to that part later. Empathy is indeed part of the process, but I'm not flattering you for the sake of it. You're actually making reasonable points. If we're talking shit, I would say that too. Now, let's take a real world example, and then let me get off this pedestal of aloofness and knowing it all. I don't know shit, but I know shit. And what I mean by that is a few weeks ago, and you and I also have a professional relationship on this startup that we're working on, and you were working on some video edits for some influential people in Hollywood, and suddenly you had like 20 other things that you had to do, and you were stressed. You were stressed about all these things that you need to do. But if you ever wonder that it's not the work which is stressing you, it's your relationship with the work which is stressing you. And let us deconstruct what that really means. Your act of making an edit or producing a piece actually gives you joy. The part of you waiting for the feedback, whether it's positive or negative or the whatever's coming, is what actually you used the word 2 weeks ago, dread. Now, so theoretically, according to the logic of meditation, if you can't do anything about it, don't dwell on it, because every minute you're spending on the dread, you're taking away from your limited time on earth. If you actually breathe in and breathe out, which sounds like the dumbest shit ever, enough, and you focus on your breathing in and breathing out enough, what meditation really is not the focus on the breath, but rather the ability to observe when your focus strays from your breath into that, in quotes, dread about the work or your critique which may come, and then bringing it back to the breath.
That's a big part of it is, I think, the fact that we are consuming so much of this negative sort of just mind space, and everything that people are spewing, the vitriol, the hate, and everything just seems to be so depressing and negative that you can't help but let that affect you at some level. And I guess
just look at it as trivial, like it doesn't matter, like it's all, we're impermanent. These are all thoughts, these are all manifestations. They'll come, they'll go, they'll come, they'll go.
Yeah.
If you really take 10 steps above it, and not like for Black Lives Matter, it's a massive movement, it's an important movement. COVID, it can all become overwhelming. Just take one step a bit before it and just look at it all, and then just focus on the present. Just focus on the present. They keep talking about focusing on the present. There is substance to that. Our anxieties come from dwelling in the past or ruminating about the future. This meditation is nothing but mental weightlifting. I say that literally. You are literally creating muscles in your brain. The science says that. Right. Yeah. And then I think there's one other part which is called meta meditation, as in good feelings for other people. But that's really trippy stuff, which is also proven to work. And so when you make your mind about, when you meditate about having kind feelings for others, like today I had kind feelings for Shanks and you become happier as a person also.
Shanks is our producer on this, on my podcast, the man behind the scenes, in one ear, egging me along. Thank you, Shanks, again for helping us construct this episode.
Final thought, after I've spewed all this bullshit to you, I'm looking forward to my drink and jumping off a cliff.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm done with this shit, bro.
Because at the end of it, none of us have any of the answers, man. At the end of the day, I think my biggest learning from this is we're doing the best we can. And I think everybody just, that's all you can do, is the best that you can for yourself. Do what makes you happy. Get through the day and just not be that stressed. Reach out to the people you love now. And don't take things so seriously, because the world is coming to an end anyway.
Yep. And I'm just saying, all the things you said, meditation will better enable you to do all that other stuff.
Yeah. And I think that what's going to be very interesting is for me to touch base with you, maybe do another podcast with you and another follow-up episode in 6 months, because
when I'm on crystal meth and shooting heroin and gone off the grid.
Yeah,
and the name of that podcast would be The Hypocrisy of It All.
No. I'm actually really proud of you on a personal level, seeing this personal growth, seeing the way you've developed as a human, the way you've actually react to situations is so vastly different from the way it was maybe a year ago, a couple of years ago. And
thank you.
That maturity that you actually approach all of those situations is something that is perhaps the reason I actually wanted to have this conversation with you, because it's something that I want to pick up and learn, because I have an amazing, incredible, really lucky existence, man. There should be absolutely zero reason for me to complain whatsoever.
Yeah, same.
But yet, I stress out about little things.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm miserable about it.
Exactly.
Yes, I'm anxious about certain things.
I will caveat one thing. Different people have different baselines. So I might have been a more fucked up person to begin with. And some people might be like very equanimous in general. I only think it can help more and more. Right? Like the Dalai Lama, for example, he's a very equanimous, happy dude. He occasionally loses his temper and he admits to that, and he still meditates, because this practice never ends. It becomes like brushing your teeth. It's not a chore for me anymore. And if anything I've achieved, it's not being a chore.
And that's a brilliant note for us to end on, because speaking of the Dalai Lama, he had actually come to the Dune School. And now our entire conversation comes full circle. He had come to the Dune School and he was the chief guest, giving us a speech. And I was in class 6 at that time. I was 11 years old, and I was working on a physics exhibition. And the exhibition was to show people the refraction of light. So there was a senior guy who was showing the Dalai Lama this piece of glass and some sand. And he would show these this stick attached with 2 wheels. It would come down the glass, hit the sand, and then turn. And he would be like, explain to the Dalai Lama, oh, that's how light works. When it hits a surface, it's the refraction of light. And my entire job was that every time that hit the sand, I would have to clean up the sand and make it clear so that he could do the experiment again. And so by the time the Dalai Lama came across, I had chalk and sand all over my face. The guy was trying to explain the thing to him. He just looked at me and goes, "You're very dirty. You're a dirty boy." And he walked off.
That sounds like the Dalai Lama.
That is my only interaction with the Dalai Lama.
Actually, focus on the breath. It will be good. He's just an awesome dude. Anyways.
He was so cool. But yeah, man, thank you for this. I think this has been quite an enlightening conversation. I think it is important at some level to understand and know the background and see where we're coming from, because a lot of other people will have gone through similar things. But I don't think anyone should. I don't think anyone should take away from this conversation the misery and the terror that we were subjected to in school was the be all and end all of our existence in school. That is a big part of it, and of course, it defined who we were growing up. But for me, I still wouldn't change a lot of the things we had. And it kind of, it made me the person I am. And I have no regrets today, the person I am, because of that.
A very handsome person, a very, very attractive person.
And on that note, guys.
It is what it is. Cheers, man.
Thank you, Abi. I appreciate it. See you guys. See you at the next episode. Bye.
Woo.